It's equation, and the equation is energy in minus energy out, sorry, equals energy stored or energy lost. It's a positive number or a negative number. And so I like to start with energy out. So that's what I'm glad that we're starting with. Energy out are there different mechanisms that allow us to get rid of energy in the system, like the smell of it. And that goes away through heat is a big one, through ATP production. Energy can be lost through other these products. But the energy outside of things, there's multiple things that we do.
Dr. Troy Jackson, welcome back to the Healthy CEO from Asheville, North Carolina. Yes, folks, you heard that right. He is in Asheville, and this is the first time I've talked to my buddy and my business partner since all the flooding out there, and so we've been catching up as a result of that. And I tell you, it's always good to have you on the podcast, Troy. But obviously today's extra special considering everything that's gone on there. So good to see you, brother.
Yes, I'm very glad to be here. And it has been, I mean, in, incredible in the most negative sense of the word, past few months or past month of just the destruction that's happened in our town and the surrounding areas here. And, you know, on top of that, we just had such an immense outpouring of support and love and help from people all over the world uh, in our small town here in Asheville. So it's both terrible and just beautiful at the same time.
Well, I'm glad. I hope that everything gets back to normal, or at least some sense of normal, as soon as possible. And this is one of the things that's one of the cool things about the podcast today for me is that this kind of is like a little bit of return to normalcy. Hopefully for you, that you're able to make time to do this and get your mind off like just the disruptors of life and everything, and talk about something that I think is very important to this audience and just anyone that is wanting to be mindful of their health, which is energy balance, the energy balance model. And I guess let's just dive in. A lot of people probably, Troy, aren't going to hear us talk about these things in these terms because they're used to hearing just burning calories, calories in, calories out. They don't understand, being overnourished and, having, or and under, under energized or whatever the proper word would be. And I think it's important to kind of just tee this up and describe to the audience kind of from a high level view what we're going to be diving in today as it relates to this whole energy model.
We have so much that we could be talking about, and we went back and forth on different topics. I do think this is a very important one, not because it's going to offer our listeners a ton of just practical tips, but I think it's very important to understand the why, the understanding behind body composition, the ability to lose weight or lose fat, but also the difficulties. Why is it hard for me to have a healthier body composition, to lose fat or gain muscle? What are the things that's creating a plateau in my diet that I'm doing? I'm hitting this plateau. Why is that happening? I think understanding the why behind the science behind body composition and what's going on inside of our bodies is empowering. And it gives us some tools to think about. It also just gives us some appreciation of the body and knowing that all of these things, our struggles and our successes, are all part of it.
So let's just jump right in. I mean, so what is the energy balance model?
So the energy balance model is a way to understand the flux of energy in our system. And people will use interchangeable words. They'll say calories or energy. I don't use calories that much because, at least in America, when we think of calories, we think of food on the nutrition label, what that number says. But calories, big C, it's a capital C. Calorie is just an energy currency. It's just a way of describing energy in the body. And it's helpful if you kind of take out the calorie moniker and just use the word energy, because it gets you out of the idea of food and allows you to just think of the broader picture of the changes of energy coming into the system, into our bodies, the energy that's leaving our body, and what is that doing to us in terms of our weight or our body composition. And there's some competing arguments about energy balance and what's the thing that's driving obesity or driving weight loss. So I don't want to discount that there are other ideas. One of them is the insulin model, the idea that insulin, when elevated, contributes to weight gain and obesity. But the big proponents of the energy balance model, Kevin Hall being one of them, he's probably a main researcher here. He does talk about that the insulin obesity model does fit in the energy balance model through just how the hormone insulin works. And so, just from my understanding and reading about the energy balance model and the insulin model, I think that the energy balance equation makes sense, especially when it comes to my patients I'm seeing every day. What are their struggles? What are their successes? It just makes sense as a good way to describe how the system works. And the basics of the energy balance model is all comes through physics. The idea, I think it's the first law of thermodynamics, that energy is neither created nor destroyed; it's just transferred. And when we're thinking of weight loss, that energy that you're losing, that's manifesting itself as a decline in your weight, it's just energy that's left your body in some way. And that's really how this model works. We don't think of weight loss that way. We think of it just burning fat as far as we go. But I think if we if the listener will stick with me and will just kind of go through this podcast with us today, I think you will get a better appreciation of how the body works. And that empowers your ability to understand the next changes you can make to get the successful results you're looking for.
I think that's excellent. And so let's just talk a little bit about I mean, where do we the energy burn? That's one of the things too that like I listened to a Ben Greenfield podcast a long time ago where a lot of people don't really stop to ask this question. It's like, okay, where how do we burn a calorie? Are we sweating it out? Are we pooping it out? Are we what's actually going on? I found that very interesting. So let's just talk about how we rid ourselves, how we transfer this energy from our body, from its either stored position or whatever, out of our body. What happens during this process?
So it's equation, and the equation is energy in minus energy out, sorry, equals energy stored or energy lost. So it's a positive number or a negative number. And so I like to start with energy out. So I'm glad that's what we're starting with. Energy out are there different mechanisms that allow us to get rid of energy in the system, to dispel of it. And that goes away through heat is a big one, through ATP production and burn. That's like the energy currency that we feel. It can be lost through other like waste products. But the energy outside of things, there's multiple things that we do that contribute to loss of energy in the system. And there's four of them. So there's your basal metabolic rate. That's the amount of energy you burn if you don't do anything at all, just to keep the lights on in your system, your heart pumping, your lungs breathing, blood flowing, burns an X number of calories per day. There's the thermogenic effect of food. So that's how much energy it takes to break down and digest food. There's physical activity. I'm going to actually keep that one last because that's the one people know more about. And then there's non-exercise energy burn called NEAT, NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis is the fancy word. It's the amount of energy you're burning doing random things, fidgeting, fiddling, standing up, sitting down, stretching. So it's those four things that come together to define how much energy is leaving the system at any given time. And it's helpful to know that because in the calories in, calories out model or idea, when you simplify to that, for most people, calories out is how much physical activity am I doing and what's the calorie burn that's showing up on my fitness tracker. But there's three other aspects, and physical activity is not the most important one in that entire part of energy output.
Physical activity is not.
It is not the most important or not the main
Which
one.
one is?
So the
Which one
biggest one
is?
actually is your metabolic rate. 60 to 70% of the energy output is governed by your basal metabolic rate, your resting metabolic rate, how much energy you burn just living. And the hard part here is that most of your basal metabolic rate is genetic. There's lots of genetic interplay here if you're going to be a higher metabolic rate versus lower. But there's other things that do play into this, and this is where you do have a little bit of say. Body composition changes metabolic rate. So if you have more muscle mass, your metabolic rate will be higher than if you had less. It's energy expensive to keep muscle on your body. And so having more muscle mass in general will improve metabolic rate. Hormone production changes metabolic rate. So thyroid, cortisol, insulin levels. This is how the insulin model fits in. If you're hypothyroidism, your thyroid's low, you're not going to be burning as much energy. If you have a lot of cortisol in the system, then you will burn energy acutely at the short term. But long term, other systems start to downregulate. That's the chronic stress pattern, and your metabolic rate will decline. Insulin is anabolic, is trying to build, and so your metabolic rate will be affected by insulin levels. You get prediabetes or diabetes. It can dampen your metabolic rate. Another one is temperature. So if you're cold exposure, saunas, these extremes of temperatures can, at least temporarily while you're doing them, adjust your basal metabolic rate because it takes energy to warm the system back up or to cool the system down. So if you got in a cold plunge and you get out of it, that shiver that you have is trying to warm you back up. That is energetically demanding. The ability to sweat to cool your body down, energetically demanding. So your basal metabolic rate is the biggest aspect of it. And there are some things you can do to affect.
And of those that you listed, like, can you kind of put those in rank order? Because I'm sure, like, and I want to know. I like to know the things that I can do when I'm doing nothing at all that are going to keep my energy burn at a higher level. So, is there kind of a rank order to those things?
My opinion, the number one thing is muscle mass when it comes to metabolic rate because it's ever present. So your metabolic rate is higher with more muscle in your system, whether you're awake, asleep, morning, evening, Monday, Friday, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be elevated. So it's probably the biggest player of your basal metabolic rate that you can change. When you go from a low muscle state to a higher muscle state, your metabolic rate increases dramatically. And so that's a really big one. That's probably the biggest one that you want to address first, especially if you are struggling with weight in some way. Is can I get my lean mass up? Because that's just going to provide me benefits down the road. Then you can get into things like cold exposure or sauna. These get a little bit, their effectiveness may not be crazy high in terms of percentage, but if you're trying, what are the things I can be doing? It's trying out running outside when it's cold and not wearing too much, or sitting in a sauna before or after a workout, or doing a cold plunge if you have access to that. Swimming in a cold body of water is another way of doing it. There's ways you can do this that are cheap and affordable. You don't have to buy some fancy tub to do it. What I typically do is I'll walk outside, you know, having like summer clothes on, but it's cold outside, and just walk around, walk the dog, have a couple sips of coffee outside, and that's a great way to shock the system a little bit to have that cold exposure, knowing that when I'm heating back up, I'm having a little bit of that metabolic burn.
Do you recommend this is one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people that I've started doing is well, there's 2 things. There's one that's just kind of a standard protocol, but there's one that's kind of like a little hack that I can't determine because I've heard really smart people say that it's real, and I've also heard it's just a wives' tale. So let's just start out with this. All right. So when I do my cold plunge, should I do the cold plunge, then train, whether that's cardio or lifting? Or does it matter when I do? I've heard and I've started doing my cold plunge before I train, in particular before I do cardio. Like I will do cold plunge and then go do some cardio because I've heard that has a that's more it's more impactful on starting the calorie burn. Do you have an opinion on that?
I do not have an opinion on that. I will say that cold plunge, at least from a sports science world, if I understand this correctly, if you have if you have an event and you need to be ready to go the next day, cold plunge can be helpful to clear out some of that the lactic acid metabolites that cause like muscle cramping, muscle aching, soreness, and get you back for the next day. If you're trying to increase gains, cold exposure after workout can mitigate or slow that down because some of that post exercise inflammation is helpful. It's a positive stressor to the system to enhance, to optimize is that what's called a hormetic stress, a stressor that
Mhm.
makes you better. Um, so if you're, if you're an athlete and you see this a lot with football, they are doing practice, but they have a game the next day. They'll cold plunge afterwards, so they'll be ready the next day. But if you're just trying to make gains in a gym or with sprints or endurance exercises, and you don't have something to do the next day, I would not do it at least after your exercise. I can't answer to before that would do.
All right, so here's my potential wives' tale. I've heard that rubbing Vicks on trouble areas before doing cold exposure and workout can burn more fat. I know that like around my waist, I keep that's yeah, I did my sprint this morning and I am at 10.2% body fat, which I'm pleased with. I've stayed right there from whenever I had my jaw surgery and it got really low down to around 8%. Then I went up to 10.4. Now I'm at 10.2. But every bit of my fat is around my waist. I'm the typical, middle-aged dude, so I have done this. I've rubbed some Vicks around my waist before I get into the cold plunge and go work out. Is that doing anything or is that a wives' tale?
I am not sure. I have not heard that.
Okay.
I haven't used Vicks since I was like 3 years old.
I love Vicks. Yeah, that's back. Yeah, us Southern boys, we had some Vicks on our nose and our
Oh
chests
yeah,
and
my mom would rub it all on. I
cured
remember
everything.
it still, but I haven't used it as an adult.
Okay. All right. Well, I heard that, and one of the most reliable sources was Joel Green, who I think is a really smart guy. Now he also says it's not a panacea, and you shouldn't do it for a long, long period of time, but that it can have an effect. So I just wondered if you had any take on that. Okay, so in the rank order, all right. So that's one of the things too about just going back. We talk about it so much on this show is lean body mass, how important it is. So, Troy, people are going to hear that. Let's say that they're in their 50s or 60s and they say, Troy, I'm too old to build muscle as a component of my training to try to manage my metabolic rate or whatever. To that patient, to that listener, what do you say?
Your belief that you are too old to build muscle is a narrative that has been told to you by someone else. And it's a manifestation of our culture where aging is this process that we have to start cutting down on the things that we can do. And then eventually we just can't do anything and we sit in a lazy boy recliner. This is all made up. I see patients on the entire spectrum every single day in their 80s and 90s that are doing incredible things, in their 50s and 60s that can't leave the chair. And there are reasons for that, of course. I'm not saying that those people that are suffering needlessly, but the idea that you're almost shooting yourself in the foot by saying I can't do something because of my age. My thought is that you should be proven of that. You should, like, go out and start trying it out and see what happens. If you feel better, feel youthful because you're building muscle, then go for it. Keep doing it. I, Peter T will say this: no one will be 90 years old with muscles and say, "I wish I hadn't worked out."
Right, right.
So, and there's studies, and I think we talked about one on here before of 90-year-old women doing a workout routine and they build lean mass over like 6 weeks, proving the concept that you can build lean mass no matter how old you are. It may be more difficult, maybe slower, because there's difficulties with building muscle and absorbing protein as you age. There's obviously risks of injury that may increase as you age too, but that doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means the ability to reach your goal may be a little bit slower. But
Right.
you should never shortchange yourself and shortchange your body by saying I can't do something because of my age.
All right. Well, let's get into the big one that everybody's all that's going to have an impact on everybody is the TEF, the thermogenetic effect of food kind of talk about the food in this equation and how we start to think about that as we try to maintain a good energy balance.
So I like this concept, thermogenic effect of food, because I feel like for many people listening, they're going to say, "Oh, that's why people recommend that I eat this certain way to lose weight." So what this is just the amount of energy it takes to burn the food or digest the food you're already. And this isn't a huge amount. It's maybe 5 to 10% of your total energy output, how many calories that you are burning throughout the day, how much energy you're burning throughout the day. But it's looking at the different macronutrients and what does it take to break them down. So there's carbohydrates. That's 5 to 10% of carbohydrate from a calorie perspective is necessary to burn it. And that's not a ton, but it is some. Refined carbohydrates, white flours, ultra processed foods, the ability to break that down is almost zero. It almost takes no energy to break it down. It's already been broken down for you. That's why it's hyper palatable, easy to chew, easy to eat, easy to digest. The complex carbohydrates, whole grains, vegetables, fruits found in their natural form, these things are more difficult to process, and those make it up to 10%, meaning a 100 calorie, if you ate 100 calories of broccoli, you'd only get 90 calories in your system because it took 10 calories to burn it. So that's how the math works. Higher fiber gives you that higher 10% as well. So it's a easy way to kind of understand, am I getting this thermogenic effect? The more fiber you consume, the more energy it takes to burn it, to break it down. Fat is pretty low. We're really, really good at breaking down fat very easily. So fat is pretty negligible in terms of how much energy it takes to break it down. Protein is the darling of thermogenic effect. So protein is takes 20 to 30% of its calories to burn itself, to break itself down. And that's huge. So if you're eating a 30-gram piece of chicken or 30 grams of protein, let's say it's chicken, that's 120 calories because there's 4 calories per gram. So 4 times 30, 120. But it takes 20 to 30% to actually break that down. So you may only actually be getting 100 calories of that chicken. And so it took 30 calories to burn it. So the higher the protein diet that you consume, the more protein consumed throughout the day, the more advantage you get this thermogenic effect. And you may say, well, 30 calories, that's not a ton. Well, if it's 3 times a day, if you have a protein shake 4 times a day, now you're getting 100 calories, 120 calories that you lost just by consuming protein. And I think it was Kevin Hall, I mentioned before, he did a study where the difference between someone who's lean and someone who's obese is about 100 calories per day if given enough time. So the changing of body composition, the increasing of fat and weight may be 100 calories, and you may negate that 100 calories by just eating more protein throughout the day.
I think that's so important to know because so much it's like I'm looking at your like the fact that people they always hear that carbs are bad, which they have their part, but I mean carbs literally require zero energy to burn, right? So it's like they're I mean, unless you are and if am I thinking about this right? So you get no metabolic effect through the digestive process. So there it's like everything is either gonna put it in and either you're gonna go burn it right away, like setting up kind of a match, boom, or it's gonna go into stored fat where then you're gonna have to create some sort of other activity to actually start to use that energy. Whereas these more protein dense foods you're actually burning calories just by eating that thing because through the digestive process of it breaking it down, it's going to require some metabolism that carbohydrates would not.
Yeah, so it's fat is the one that requires almost no energy to break down. Carbohydrates, if they're complex, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, or things with high fiber in them, that does have a calorie burn to it, some thermogenic
Okay.
effect. Um, but we're really good at storing fat. So what this would tell you is high fat diets, unless you are very active individual and your body is very good at burning fat, that you are going to store that. It's easy to store that. There are other ways to improve that. So people who are on ketogenic diets, really low carbohydrate, of course, there are ways that you can improve fat oxidation, the burning of fat, and so it's not an issue for you. But you're not going to rely on the thermogenic effect of food to get you there. You're going to rely on other things. You're going to be doing other parts to your health. But if you're just trying to eat a balanced diet, having more protein helps you in terms of body composition. Having more fiber and complex carbohydrates helps you in terms of body composition and decreasing fat in general, decreasing energy intake in general.
Very good. All right. So now let's talk about neat a little further, which how this had escaped me. I'm sure I've heard it at some point, but I wasn't quite familiar with that term until you sent it to me. So let's talk about
Yeah.
neat.
Neat is my favorite of this entire thing. So neat is basically activities that you're doing throughout the day that you would not call exercises, non-purposeful movement. So, the, tapping your finger on the table or shaking your leg or standing up, sitting down, stretching, all these little bitty movements throughout the day, negligible calorie burn to do them in the moment, add up over time. Unfortunately, with NEAT is that most of it is this is genetically determined, and you see, I mean, the fidgety kid in class, or the person just could sit there slothfully the whole day and never move. Like, so there are some genetic like extremes here, but for most people, on average, you burn about 350 calories a day through NEAT, through this fidgety aspect. The people who have the highest NEAT, the highest amount of movement, get up to 700, 800 calories a day of, of energy burn just through this process. So it's very interesting because we don't think of this, but that's high. I mean, most people aren't burning 700 calories working out each day, but you're going to burn 700 calories if you're on the high end of this NEAT equation. The interesting that is NEAT is not, though it's like a subconscious thing, you can't will yourself to fidget more or shake your foot more. You're going to forget to do it at some point. You can influence your environment to increase NEAT. And that's really where the practical tip is here is how do you change how you're living your life to make you move more? So it could be working from a standing desk. So when you're standing up, you're shifting from foot to foot. Maybe you're lifting your foot and putting it back down. Maybe you're sitting down and standing up, sitting down, standing up. You're more likely to walk around your office or down the hall because you get tired of just standing in one place. These are all ways to increase NEAT. All of those things add up. Taking the stairs instead of the elevator is another way to increase NEAT because you're going up the steps, you're having to hold onto things and pull. You're going down the steps. That takes some different energy. You're breathing a little heavier when you're done. That plays into this. And then exercise. So exercise in general improves NEAT. So they've done studies. Sedentary individuals burn about 100 calories per day through NEAT, whereas very active people on average burn 400 plus. So having some level of exercise throughout the day increases NEAT, increases your spontaneous movements doing other things. The only downside to NEAT is that it is definitely influenced by calorie intake. So if you're trying to calorie restrict, limit your calories, your NEAT will decline at some point. And it's a natural mechanism in your body. Your body is saying, I have less energy coming in. There must be a reason. So I'm going to basically hibernate. I'm going to turn down a lot of the things that I'm doing to conserve energy, just in case I'm not going to get something, food to come into the system for a while. So it's a safe mechanism. We were created in scarcity. Our bodies have been developed in scarcity. We're really good at maintaining, at surviving. But when the going gets tough and the famine happens, the body will shut down to try to keep you going for as long as possible. So obviously this is a problem. If you cut your calories by 400 calories per day, but your NEAT went from 400 calories per day of energy burn and then dropped 300 and you're only burning 100, the net is that you're only down 100 calories, right? So So this is the major plateau reason. When people are losing weight, losing fat, let's say, and they cut their calories and things are going great, month 1, month 2, wonderful, month 3 happens, and it just stops. Often it's NEAT that has stopped. It's downregulated, it's supposed to do, and it's made it difficult for you to continue the weight loss you're doing unless you make a change. Now, with NEAT, it can only go down so far. Clearly, with calories, you could go restrict all the way down to 0. So that's a lot wider of a lever that you can pull through, as opposed to NEAT. It only goes down to 100 or so. So and it only goes up to like 400. So it can only go down so much. So it goes down to a certain point. You can't really change that. You try to exercise more. You try to take the stairs more. You stand more. You do these other things that may help NEAT, but then you may have to calorie restrict even further to overcome. But I do find it fascinating. It's a part that a lot of people don't know about, but it's an interesting aspect of our bodies works.
Yeah, and again, though, you can't just all of a sudden start going out there and buying the fidgeted tools or whatever and start thinking, "Oh, well, I'll just fidget more and I won't have to exercise." That's not gonna work.
Yeah, we've all been here where you get absorbed into a project at your desk, or you're watching a really good movie, and you realize an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later that you haven't moved at all. Your body's in the
Mhm.
same position. Your back hurts a little bit. Your muscles ache because you haven't moved. And that's the problem with sitting and NEAT. It reduces your NEAT because you're in this you ergonomically perfect environment to not have to move at all. So you have to push against that. That's the modern environment problem, the comfort crisis. If anybody's ever read that book, it's a great book. This problem of comfort. Well, in this, what we're talking about here, the comfort is reducing your NEAT, reducing the spontaneous activity to burn calories or burn energy.
100%. I know one of the things that when I think about it, I keep a little treadmill in my home office. And one of the things that I try to do is always, if I'm going to set up, especially if I'm going to do some deep work, I'll try to limit it to 30 minutes at a time and set an alarm to get up, do jumping jacks, get on the treadmill, sometimes even go down to my garage, do a few pull ups, do something to move because I'm that person. If I'm not careful and I'll just start looking at I'll start thinking, I'm like, God, I could like sit for 2 hours and not move. And it's just terrible. And so, because I'm not a naturally fidgety person, I can sit really still, not move, unless I'm bored. Then I'm going to do the knee tap big time. Um, but other than that, that's one of the things I try to do. And I saw our friend Rhonda Patrick. She posted a video here recently about if you do, I can't remember if it was like 100 air squats, maybe it was 100 air squats a day throughout the day that you would have the same metabolic effect as if you had like gone for a 3-mile walk or something like that. So just doing these putting those little things in there, which I guess would fall into the category of NEAT, they really do make a difference. And that's one of the things I try to encourage people to do is like just if you hate working out, then you shorten your workout if you have to, and please do train. But if you're not going to do that, then at least just figure out these little micro doses throughout the day, and you'd be surprised at what a difference they make.
Yeah, I mean, or having little kids. That's where I'm in right now. I mean,
Oh, that'll do it.
you see the NEAT that they have. They're
Yeah.
up, down, in here, in there, in here, in there. And it's exhausting to watch. My wife did this once. It's very funny. She tried to mimic everything that my daughter did for as long as she could. So if she sat down, my wife sat down. If she stood up, my wife stood up. She jumped, my wife jumped. A minute, maybe. She got in before she was exhausted. Just all the stuff that they're doing. Yeah, so they're the naturally fidgety person. Gus Vickery here in the office, he's like that too. If you're in a meeting with him, he's going to stand up 17 times in an hour-long meeting. Just can't sit still. But so those people. That's what that looks like. But you can be that person. You can't will yourself to that.
Mhm.
But changing your environment, having a standing desk. My other colleague here, Charlie, she has a walking desk and or a treadmill under her desk, and it's just doing these little bitty things that increase just the spontaneous activity throughout the day. Very helpful.
I've thought about, James Quandall and I have talked about a lot how Ben Greenfield now does his podcast on his little treadmill. and he's a little breathy. I think it's kind of annoying to listen to him. The other day, he had some guest on there, and both of them were on their treadmills, and it was kind of obnoxious. But, it is impactful, those little things, that those extras, and I've tried to incorporate those because I'm telling you, dude, the older I get, it's just gonna be that much harder, and that's one of the things too I wanna ask you while I've got you. Again, Troy, I mean, if I could get my waist to look like my shoulders and my arms and my legs, man, I'd be ripped. I'd look amazing. But I cannot, cannot have a tight waist. I mean, what am I doing wrong? I mean, is there anything I can do with regard to, some of the things we're talking about as far as how I manage my energy? Is there anything I can do, or is that genetic and short of just really, really, I mean, I know I can go on these, I could go on some sort of a diet, but like I said, I'm 10.2% body fat, but still have a soft waist. I mean, is there any hope for me?
Yeah, all 10% is right around your midsection.
Dude, I'm telling you, it pretty much is. It's crazy.
So, the subcutaneous fat, the fat that you can pinch and squeeze, the one that probably people hate the most,
Yep.
is the least unhealthy for you. So your body, it's like stored fat, but it doesn't really cause much in terms of health problem. It's just unsightly. People just don't like it. Unfortunately, that fat has been there for you for a very long time.
Hmm.
And so long, in fact, that it can lose its nerve signals that stimulate it to be burned or to even be stored to. So like having it getting bigger may actually not happen either. So it almost becomes part of you. That's not to say you'll never be able to burn it. It's just much longer road than typical for that fat. I don't, as far as I know, there's no great solution to really stimulate that fat tissue back to get it mobilizing again. I think a lot of it is consistency in what you're doing for a long period of time. Probably are making inroads, but it might be very, very small, subtle inroads that are really difficult to figure out and manage, um, unfortunately.
So I was looking here. There was one that I wanted to look at that really kind of bummed me out on. Folks, when you hear me talk about Spren, I recommend this app to everyone. A buddy of Troy's and mine, he's the founder of the company of Spren. It's Jason Jones,
Jason Moore, local
Jason Moore.
Asheville native
I went,
here.
yeah.
He originally created Elite HRV, which is a wonderful company measuring HRV for individuals. But he came out with this other product, Spren, or maybe they were acquired or joined together. I don't remember. But as you're scrolling through that, Spren is a way to measure body composition at home using your phone camera, at least your iPhone camera. Android works too. But a lot of data. There's actually a good bit of data behind using the optics on a camera to estimate body composition, and does a really good job. He uses our DEXA to calibrate the app, so we feel pretty happy and excited about that part. But very fascinating. The only, I mean, you can do it weekly is what they recommend. I don't see too much change week to week, so I usually just do it once a month, just a way just to look and see. But if it's easier from a perspective weekly, then do. But they're adding a lot of new features on there. It's a really good company. He's a really good guy. Excited to know him.
So one of the things that I noticed that I wasn't too happy with was, even with my pretty good overall numbers, I guess is basically my visceral fat, or like in my around my organs, was a little higher than it should be. That kind of bummed me out. But I mean, it wasn't terrible. I mean, overall everything's pretty good, but I was like, I didn't understand. I wasn't really happy about that.
Yeah, visceral fat is fat around your organs. You don't see this type of fat, and it's not a lot. People might be half a pound or a pound. It's not a ton of fat there, but fat around the organs, this visceral fat is inflammatory. It creates its own inflammatory molecules. It actively damages the organs that it surrounds. NASH, which is Uh, Non-alcoholic is probably changed now. Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, so inflammation of your liver related to fat that's around it and accumulated inside of it, is growing, is now the number one reason for cirrhosis in America. So this is a big problem that people need to really understand what their visceral fat levels are. You can get it on a DEXA or body comp machine. But even if you don't get those things, if you have abdominal obesity, the colloquial term is like apple shape, fat around the midsection, that you can make the assumption that you have some amount of visceral fat, and any reduction in waist size, pulling the belt a little tighter, your pants fit a little looser, you have likely lost some amount of visceral fat. It's always a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I'm looking, I am at a healthy rate on it's the android fat, gynoid fat, hip
Oh,
thigh region, abdominal region, all that, the numbers are back healthy. They were a little on the high side there for a minute, but we got that under control, so I guess that's good. I don't need to complain about that. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program instead of folks going over my body fat analysis, BMR. I mean, have we
we
covered
did,
NEAT to the extent you
yeah,
wanted to,
and we
Troy?
covered metabolic rates. The next one's physical activity.
There we go. Okay.
So physical activity is what people focus on and think about, but your ability to burn calories or burn energy exercising is all over the place. And the adage is you can't outwork a bad diet. You're not going to lose weight by just working out. It's going to take something else. But it's very important in this whole energy equation. You want to stack the deck in your favor. So physical activity is important. These are all rough numbers, but if you were to go jog for a mile, you burn about 100 calories. Pace matters here, of course, but just a leisurely, not a marathon runner pace, about 100 calories an hour. If you're weightlifting, for most sessions, it's going to be 200, maybe a little bit less than that. If you're doing like supersets, then maybe it's higher. If you're doing uh, some like kind of cardio aspects of strength training, there's like fusion, you can maybe burn a little bit higher than that. And then hit training can burn a good bit more. Uh, it's going to be at least 100 calories, but most people are doing hit training where you're getting 200, 300 calories in a session. And that's where you're doing a really high intense workout or activity, and then you pull it back and you're doing almost none. So this would be doing sprints and then walking, sprints and walking as an example, or doing a jump pretty fast and then not doing anything, or doing on a bike, going as fast as you can for 20 seconds and then barely pedaling for 10. So that's hit training. So all of these things burn some amount of calories, but for an entire session, 30 minutes or an hour, and you only got 200 calories to show for it, that's not going to be the thing that's going to get you to lose weight. You can't just add more strength training or exercise sessions throughout the day. You're going to run out of time before you get to the weight that you're looking for. So, but it's very important. I will say this, that exercise is not the thing that makes you lose weight, but it is one of the most important factors at helping you maintain the weight that you have. So one, it's improved your metabolic rate. You have more muscle mass. That's helped there already. But the exercise, the 200 calories that you're burning during an exercise bout may be all you need to maintain that difference. Like I mentioned before, the 100 calorie per day difference is going to separate you from being lean or being obese. It's very important, but I would get into the rhythm of physical activity, because at some point down the road, you're going to reach a goal, a weight that you're going to stop, and it's physical activity that keeps you there. So it's very important in that aspect of it, but not as the major influencer for energy output that you may think it is.
Yeah, I was listening to, I guess it might have been Peter Tia talking about how there was some research that was done recently where he might have been talking um, about, semaglutide, having that conversation again, and it basically said that people that, like, maybe it wasn't that, it doesn't matter. It was like they had a study where people that exercise versus those who didn't exercise but maintained the same caloric restriction lost roughly the same amount of weight. So there couldn't be any big determining, impact in the affirmative or for the positive for exercising. That said, the 2-month follow-up is where it really kicked in. The people that exercised maintained the weight loss, whereas those who did not exercise afterwards, or they weren't all they did was calorie restriction and then didn't exercise, most all of them gained the weight back. And I think that is the important thing. I think that's another reason why a lot of people get so frustrated, and I've noticed this in my life. I mean, I have proven it over and over and over. You cannot out-train a bad diet, is that people get pissed because they start going to the gym or whatever, and they start training, they start exercising, but they do nothing about their alcohol intake, the timing of their eating, what they eat during the middle of the day and all these things. And they wonder, wait a minute, I'm exercising more. Well, yeah, and they might be building some lean body mass. It's going to be hidden by fat. And so it can be really frustrating that no matter how much we like it or not like it, it's always gonna come back to nutrition at some point if you really wanna dial this stuff in.
I mean, today we're recording on Halloween, so you
Mhm,
could go run before, while your kids are trick or treating. You burn 200 calories. You get home, they go to sleep. You can easily eat 400 calories of whatever they brought home. So it's very
mhm.
easy to eat more than you burn.
Yeah. Yeah, the good Lord has an interesting way of doing all that. It's real easy to put it on, real hard to take it off. When you get older like me, you grow hair where you don't want it, you lose it where you do. He's a mad scientist.
The other thing I'll say about physical activity is this concept called afterburn. So
Mm,
I think this is interesting and does influence the types of workouts that you may choose. Afterburn is the idea that your metabolic rate is temporarily increased after some bout of exercise that lasts for some amount of time afterwards, so an hour or 2 hours afterwards. This afterburn effect is most prominent, most apparent after a strength training session or a HIIT workout. There's a lot of recruitment of muscle fibers, a lot of recruitment of your mitochondria making all these energy molecules at a really rapid pace that the body kind of stays into that mode for another hour or two after the fact, which maybe gets you another 100 calories of energy burn afterwards. You don't really get that much in endurance exercises. I think the idea is that you're kind of easing into something and then you're maintaining that and then you're easing out of it. So there's not this big separation of what you normally do versus what you're doing in your exercise in terms of what your body is doing. We're very efficient walkers and joggers. We were made to do that. And so our bodies don't stray too far from the norm when we're doing those things. Obviously, if you're running like super fast, 5-minute miles, or you're running a half marathon, you may get a afterburn effect there because you put your body into a different state. But the general 3-mile, 5-mile runs are probably not going to get us there. The other thing I'll say is that you can overdo it. I do see this a ton. People are like, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. They're hitting the gym. This is, the January 1st idea. They hit the gym. They're working out a ton. And maybe they didn't change their diet. Maybe they did, but their body bonks. They're, they get really fatigued. It's hard to wake up. It's hard to, you feel sluggish, exhausted. So your NEAT decreases, right? So that's all NEAT, but you're hungry. You're burned all this energy. Now your body's trying to compensate for that. So you eat more. So your calories go up and the end result is nothing, right? So that's the whole problem. Doing something, just going all in and going 0 to 100 can really bite you 4 weeks in. Whereas if you ease into it or remember that this is not the thing that's going to make me lose weight, but this is the habit that's going to keep me healthy for a long period of time. Let's get into a routine, a couple days a week, 3, 5, whatever works with your schedule. Have some rest days and off days where you're not doing too much in terms of pushing your body. And if you're trying to lose weight, it's the other side of this equation we haven't gotten to yet of reducing energy in that's going to be the biggest player for you.
Am I better off since there is a bigger afterburn effect with strength training? Am I smarter to like, I work out twice a day, and what I do is I've started doing cardio in the morning and then do weight training in the afternoon. Am I Is that a wise decision in that since my largest meal of the day is definitely gonna be dinner after my workout, that if just from a timing perspective, if I'm gonna do it, that it's better to do that do the heavier stuff in the afternoon? Will I benefit from that?
It's probably a net effect of the same. You're going to have the
Okay.
afterburn effect, whether it's in the morning or the evenings. It probably all washes out
Okay.
at the end of the day. What matters most is what are you going to do? Most people, you might have more time to run or do some sort of cardio in the morning than you do in the evening. So you kind of, I would rather base your schedule off what's the most practical for you rather than what's the most efficient.
So are we ready to get into the thing that everybody's just dying to hear about is how much they're going to have to
That's
reduce their
right.
caloric intake?
Yeah. So that entire thing, the last 49, almost 50 minutes of this talk was all about energy out. How do we get energy out of our system in all these different ways? The other part of the equation, the first part is energy in. How are we getting energy into the system? So that's the other part here. And this whole equation is energy balance. So in a state where we're trying to maintain weight, you want to maintain energy balance. And our bodies are actually really good at this. You see this in the animal world a lot. You never see unless they're sick and something's wrong, you never see an emaciated wild animal. You never see an obese wild animal. They've maintained weight really well. Humans can maintain our weight really well. We're very good at it without having to count calories or do all these extra things. We're just naturally good at it. It's our modern environment that has made it difficult to do so. We now have all of these psychological players into our mind about food and food intake. People who are really smart and paid a lot of money have figured out how to manipulate food to make it taste the best, digested the easiest, make you want that next bite. It's these other factors that have played into our life that has made it difficult for us to naturally maintain this energy balance equation. So, when we're thinking of energy intake, it's not just the literal food that we're consuming that we need to be worried about. It's the social setting, the environmental world that we are consuming our food in that is also playing into our energy input. Or do we have signals making us eat more? Do we have signals making us eat less? And that's a major player. So when we get into this, keep that in the back of your head that the hard numbers may not matter as much as the environment that we're talking about. You can eat, the same type of macronutrients in a healthier setting, a more controlled setting, and you have balance. But when you're in a different setting, lots of advertisements and lots of people telling you or bringing food to you, or you're not sleeping well, it's going to go all over the place.
You know, I was what was I listening to the other day that it made me kind of think about something along these lines. I hate to beat up on Ben Greenfield, and I understand the vein in which he was talking about. He was doing a Q&A session where somebody was asking him like, what are the healthier alcohols to drink? And all I could think about was, and this is not to knock Ben because I know exactly what he was talking about. Somebody asked the question, he started talking about this, some kind of really pure kind of tequila and all this stuff. But it made me believe it kind of led me to believe what we're talking about here is that just because you are drinking the good tequila does not mean that you're going to make bad decisions after. There's more to it than just is that one shot of tequila healthy or not? Because the what that one shot of tequila will do is encourage you to take another shot of tequila, and then that third shot of tequila, and then before you know it, all those compounded will make you go to Whataburger late at night and crush 2,500 calories at midnight, and so just the wheels come off. I think that's and the reason why I bring that up is because I think that's one of the things that we take for granted when we're talking about calories in and what we just think of it that it's just calories in, calories out. Am I eating well? Am I eating not? But we don't stop to think about how can we structure our environment, our workspace, our home, our pantry, our our stress levels, all these things to be conducive to a healthier way to eat. It's all it behavioral science suggests that it all comes into play. It's not just having the right food at that time. It's when are you eating, where are you eating, and all that. So when you said that, I was like, that just I was listening to Ben. I mean, it was hard not to get mad at him. I mean, he it's not been. He was just trying to answer the
Sure.
question. I'm like, it's kind of like Joe Rogan always talking about how smoking weed is so great and it's no big deal or whatever. It's like, well, okay, first of all, Joe Rogan, if you end up with the subsequent problems that come after for a lot of people, you make around 30 million bucks a year. You're a biohacker. You're going to be okay dealing with any other addictions that may come your way as a result of you firing up all the time. Not everybody has your resources and has the mental wherewithal to not make subsequently poor decisions after, smoking a fatty every afternoon. So, I mean, there's just, again, it's not just a zero sum game. And I get really passionate about that when people just want to try to isolate it down to, wait a minute, this is what I eat. Well, when are you eating it? Where are you eating it? How much are you eating of it? So anyway,
Yeah.
I
No, you're
digress.
fine. I see it all the time too, especially in our line of work. People are really trying to figure this out. They're really trying to lose fat. They have legitimate reasons to do so. And not everybody else, we're very practical beings. And it's like, well, the package said this, and my fitness pal said this. I'm checking all the boxes. It's not working, right? So there are reasons for that, and we're going to go through some of them on how energy input can be misleading. But then we just already went over all the energy output things that we're not measuring can be also impacting the end result. So energy input, this is what you're eating. It's the amount of uh, calories, the big C, amount of calories that we're consuming through our food. And it's easy to think about this just when you're thinking about macronutrients. Each macronutrient has a calorie amount per gram. So, for example, carbohydrates, every gram of carbohydrates gives you 4 calories. Protein, every gram is 4 calories. Every gram of fat is 9 calories. Every gram of alcohol is 7 calories. And then fiber is very little. The last two are not technically macronutrients, but I count them in because they are part of our life and they do matter when it comes to this equation. And so we think of it in terms of that, and the nutrition label on the back is not accurate, to the realist. I'm not a nutrition label maker, but my understanding is that the company sends their food product off somewhere and they test it. What I think, I mean, college, it's like a bomb calorimeter. It's this thing that just they figure out all the chemical bonds have to break and how much energy is made from that, and that's the calories that's on there. That's true if you're eating every single thing in its totality, right? And you're you're digesting it appropriately, that's the right calories, but it may not actually be accurate in terms of what you are doing. You know, portion sizes are very hard to manage and understand for a lot of people, especially if you're not cooking it yourself. So there's that's where this gets muddy. But for all intents and purposes, what the amount of calories you're consuming should be the amount of calorie, and you're not losing weight, should be the equal to the amount of calories that you are burning, that it's leaving the system. That helps you maintain weight. If you are gaining weight, the energy in is higher than the energy out. And if you're losing weight, then it's the opposite. Your energy output is higher than your energy in. Okay. Um, I do want to talk about just measurement in general. So we, you may have, all of you listening have, you, Jason, have tried, tracking calories before. And if you've ever done it, if you haven't done it, you may not can relate to this, but if you've ever done it, it's very difficult. You have to put in every little thing that you're consuming in this app. You type in broccoli. There's 5 different broccoli choices you can choose from that all have a little bit different, amount of calories on them. Or you go out to eat somewhere and the local Mexican chain isn't in your MyFitnessPal, so you can't put in your P5 or your chips and queso into that thing because it's not there. So it's very difficult. That doesn't mean it's not important, but it means that we cannot put all of our eggs in that basket. We can't say, I am eating 1,500 calories, because you may not be. And the result is the thing that's going to tell you that. I'm not losing weight. Well, you have to be, if you're maintaining weight, then you're just eating the same amount that you're burning. So you have to increase one of those things, increase energy output, which is hard to do. We just talked about that. Or you can decrease the amount of calories you're consuming. And if you ever hit a plateau, the easiest lever to pull is decreasing calories further and further. And people may be listening saying, no, I do really good at this. I'm really good at putting the numbers in. And maybe you are. But there are studies that validate this idea of inaccuracy with putting in calories, and especially in like a app or a food log, that for most people, we are underestimating the amount of calories we consume, 30% to 50%. So if you
Wow.
are eating, if you say, I ate 1,500 calories, the average person is probably eating 1,900 calories to 2,200 calories. Okay. So that's a big difference. The difference between, like, to take the average of those numbers, the difference between 2,000 calories and 1,500 calories is weight loss. So if you're not losing weight, it's probably because there's an underestimation aspect here. And why is that? I don't really know why this is. And and everyone's a little bit different here. People who don't have to lose weight, who are leaner already, and they're asked in a study to measure their calories, they may be 15 to 20% off. If people who are obese and they're really needing to lose calories, they may be up to that 50% off. And this sounds kind of sadistic, sinister why that's happening. The people who need or want to lose the most weight have the hardest time at reporting their calories. And this isn't, I'm not judging anybody, because there's lots of psychological factors wrapped into that. And I do think that's a big issue here, is when you're in a study like this, there's probably some level of embarrassment or trying to, seem better than maybe things actually are. I see that all the time. People try to when they calorie count for a couple of days in our program, they make those the best 2 days of their life. So there may be some part of that. People who are obese may have a difficult time really understanding portion sizes, what an actual portion is. And that's just from years of a learned behavior, that it's not their fault. It's just part of the environment, like we talked about earlier, the environment they've been in. There might be just a reduced awareness of what the calorie density of food is. So just might not be aware that what they're eating is actually very high in calories. Despite maybe it seems healthy. The Zaxby's salad at Zaxby's is like 2,500 calories. It's a healthy choice, sure, but it's got loaded with other things. And so it makes it very difficult here. The best people at estimating calories are dietitians, and they're probably in the range of 10% off on average. They're equally accurate. Doctors, I mean, I'm not off the hook. We're really bad too. 30% off of estimated calories as well. So what that says is, no matter if you're super smart or not, super lean or not, we're just not really good at this. It doesn't mean that it's not helpful. It just means we shouldn't put a ton of stock in the hard number. We should use the number as a guide or a ballpark estimate. If we think we're eating 1,500 calories and we're not losing weight, we should just be okay with the understanding that maybe we're off. And we should drop that down to where we think we're only consuming 1,000 calories. That may sound ridiculous to you, but you may actually really be consuming 1,500 calories, and that's a lot more manageable thing. And so I always want to encourage people that if you're hitting plateaus and it's been there for a while, your body has not really budged from that, then it's safe to lower calories further and just see what happens.
I want to ask you a question. Is there a chance too that like one of the things that I run into a lot, Troy, is I don't eat enough calories and therefore I will have weight. I'll have a stickiness effect to weight. Now I don't. I mean, I also think I'm kind of a I don't know. I'm kind of a freak in this way that it seems like I mean I don't eat that much, but man, and I do maintain I guess quite a bit of lean body mass, but man, staying under that 200 mark is so very hard for me. Um, and so I probably consume 2,500 calories a day, and then I went to the calculator that you recommended, and it always comes out for me the same. It recommends between 3,500 and 3,800 calories a day is the recommendation for
To
me.
maintain
I
weight,
know if I ate,
to
huh?
maintain weight.
to maintain weight, and I put 200 because I'm always gonna be 199 to 203 depending on my water weight, and so I know if I were to consume 3,500 calories consistently, I feel like I would just blow up. I feel like my face would be puffy and I'd be really fat,
So there's
but
nothing against you, but it may be that your mental understanding of 2,500 calories may actually just be
yeah.
3,000 calories,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
could be what it
Yeah.
is. You know, you figured that out because the poor man's solution of this is, what does the scale say? If the scale's staying the
Yeah.
same, then the equation is balanced. If the scale is going
Yeah.
down, the equation is not balanced or going up, right? So it might
Right.
be that that's part of this discrepancy here. And so I would say I would
Well,
go
and
up
what
to 3,500 and try that out because your weight is being maintained. If you're losing weight and you're like, I really don't want to lose any more weight, then you would have to bump up on the calories to offset that.
yeah, I'm kind of a freak about it. I mean, like, I should be happy to be 49 years old, 200 pounds, and, between 10 and 12% body fat all the time, but I'm not. Like, whenever I went through these 2 jaw surgeries and I dropped down to 191, I was pumped, dude. I loved that just from a vanity, I don't know, mental standpoint. I thought this was awesome, but also I was consuming maybe 500 calories a day there for 3 or 4 weeks, because I just couldn't eat anything. So I don't know, I think I've got some mental issues that are worse than weight issues.
And chasing a number, uh, get
Mhm.
get to
Yeah,
191. All right, well, what does 181 look like? Feel like? Never satisfied.
I did get down to 186 a few years ago whenever I got when I first got my Peloton. I wasn't doing any resistance training, and, oh, Jimlin was so upset, man. I looked so bad. I always tell people on the podcast, I've probably told you before, I look like Matthew McConaughey in Dallas Buyers Club. It was bad.
Yeah, so you look much better where you are now.
Yeah. No, I think I'm at a great healthy weight and everything, but I just don't think that a 49-year-old needs to weigh over 200 pounds. I don't care if we are in 2024 and we're just bigger people and all that. I don't care. It bugs me to no end, dude, to see over 200 on my weight.
I would make the
Freaking
argument that you
it
probably have more lean mass than most 49-year-olds with that weigh 200 pounds. And so your
yeah.
fat mass is probably a lot less than most people.
Yeah, I guess so. Thank you. Thank you for making me feel better. All right. What do we need to cover before we wrap this up? This is amazing. There's a lot of information for people to start taking control of this.
So I just want to briefly touch on the other things that influence our energy intake. So we're counting calories. We recognize now that it's a ballpark. It's not be the be all end all number. But if you don't like measuring and counting calories and you want to try to do this by just not really intuitive eating, but you just want to be more of a just aware of the foods you're eating on a daily basis and how do you just take control of that without counting. These are all things we know about, but I'm just going to talk about them again. It's choosing nutrient dense foods versus calorie dense foods. If you're someone who's naturally a high appetite, you like to eat a lot, eating a lot of salad or a lot of the side items, which are usually vegetables or fruits, you're not going to, that's not going to gain weight. Kind of helps that appetite control, but it doesn't come with a lot of calories. Calorie dense foods are things like anything at a restaurant, Oreos, cakes, these things that are small portions, 200 calories. That's what we're trying to avoid because those add up over time. They're not filling, but they're very high in calories. And before your body recognizes the caloric intake you just had, it's too far gone. You've already had too much. So, nutrient dense versus calorie dense. This plays into ultra processed foods. They are made to make you eat them, right? It is a business. Businesses make money by selling products. And the way they sell products to make you eat it fast and to make you buy it again. It just is what it is. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just how the market works. So ultra processed foods are made to be hyper palatable. They're made to make you crave them more. They're made to play into your hunger hormones to make you to not satiate those hunger cues. So you want to eating ultra processed foods in general is not really the problem, in my opinion. There are some ingredients that can be problematic, of course, but it's recognizing what they do to you and just taking that into account. Of course, I eat ultra processed foods sometimes. It's part of living with two young kids. It just happens. But you recognize that, like, all right, I know that what I just ate was awful. So I'm gonna, I need to be conscious about that and pull it back the next day. Or I know my daughter wants to go have ice cream this weekend. It's her birthday. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna pull it back a little bit, knowing that that's gonna happen and things stay the same. So just being aware, you're trying to beat the system by being smarter than the food makers around you. Sleep quality. So the more sleep deprivation you have, the more hunger you have, the less desire you have for activity, like physical activity. You have reduced NEAT because of this too, because your body's trying to conserve. And also the reduced dietary constraint. You're more likely to consume foods you're more likely to take that extra one or two bites because of the sleep deprivation. Alcohol is the same thing. You just talk about that with what alcohol does. Alcohol reduces dietary restraint. It makes you have less willpower to avoid that extra chip or that trip to Whataburger, like you said. Outside of just the fact that alcohol has calories, this is completely separate. And then there's environmental cues. I can't remember the exact numbers, but the average person driving to work passes like, or the whole day, I think you encounter like 20 advertisements. The kid sees 12 or 15. This is on your drive to work. This is on the radio. This is on the ads on your computer, commercials on your TV. If food is an ever present reminder in your life, you're going to eat it. Like you're going to say, oh yeah, I can just swing by. I forgot that Chick-fil-A just came out with a new milkshake. I'm going to go try it out. Right. I didn't know that the Starbucks line over here is actually pretty short. Let me just swing by because I saw their sign 3 miles away. It's these little things that are, and they're intentional. They're just little cues, little reminders. Hey, come check me out. Swing by when you're hungry. You don't have enough time to cook. So you just have to be aware of these things. So it's, having ad blockers on your computer, not watching TV that has commercials, or not watching TV at all. Um, you know, meal planning. So when you have things at home, so you're less tempted to stop somewhere because you know that you already purchased. There's a financial investment that you've already made at the grocery store, and now you have to eat it or it's going to go bad. So these are all ways to influence energy intake, not through counting calories, but just through changing the environment around you.
Well, I tell you one of the things that you mentioned there, whenever I see a Chick-fil-A and if I'm on the road and I'm really hungry or it's late at night and I feel like I deserve a treat, that Chick-fil-A cookies and cream shake is, oh, so amazing.
Just so
So
everyone
amazing.
knows, when I was in high school, I was the cow mascot for Chick-fil-A. Uh,
Really?
yeah, I worked in the marketing department for a couple years. And we did birthday parties and gave out samples. I was working there when the milkshake came out for the first time. But Mississippi heat, 100 and some degree weather, you're out there in the cow costume, telling people to come through the drive-through line.
And it's your pleasure.
Yes, always. Yes, it's always my pleasure.
Very good. Well, I didn't know that, you were a celebrity in addition to being, a doctor and my business partner. Man, Troy, you're just like an onion, peel you back, and there's all kinds of things you can find.
Yes, half the kids that I did birthday parties for did not think of me as a celebrity as they ran away screaming.
A giant cow.
This was like early 2000s. Like the cow did not look, I mean, it looked creepy. It looks a little bit better now, but I would have run away too.
One of my favorite things, I don't know if you ever did this whenever you were, playing your role as Chick-fil-A cow, but one of my favorite things, even though I hate carnivals or anything like that, but randomly, if I'm at some sort of a festival or a carnival and I see one of the Chick-fil-A cows on the swings
Mhm.
that are going around, I think that's the funniest thing in the world. It just cracks me up. I love that.
I never had that experience, unfortunately.
Well, that's a darn shame. All right, Troy, have we covered this to the degree you wanted to?
I think so. And if any listener listens to this and has other questions, shoot them to us. and we'd be happy to answer them either directly or make, if we get enough, make another podcast where we talk to people.
Terrific. All right. Appreciate it, brother. It's good to see you. Good to hear from you again. Stay safe and hope that all the getting life back to normal comes very quickly for you out there.
Thank you so much. It's good talking to you.
The content provided in this podcast, The Healthy CEO, is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Healthy CEO. Any information provided by our hosts or guests, including any physicians who may appear on the podcast, is solely for informational purposes and does not create any doctor-patient relationship. Listeners are advised to consult with their healthcare providers before making any changes to their health routines. The Healthy CEO and its affiliates assume no responsibility or liability for any consequence resulting directly or indirectly from any action or inaction you take based on the information provided in this podcast.